Hey everyone, my name is Zach. I'm a full-time climbing athlete, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Flagship Pros by Unparallel. Right off the bat, the first thing I noticed about the Flagship Pros by Unparallel is that they are an incredibly soft shoe. They are definitely the softest of any of the Unparallel shoes that I've tried so far, and also just one of the softest shoes I've tried in general. And soft shoes are great for a lot of things. One, they're really great for smearing because the shoe is able to flex very easily, and especially with the split sole that these shoes have, they bend very easily, which allows you to obtain more contact area with your rubber against a flat surface and just get more friction, and therefore having your foot slip around less. So yeah, these shoes are really soft, really great for smearing, and the rubber is also incredibly sticky. I really liked the Tomoe and Arasaki Pros for smearing, and basically these are just sort of a similar feeling smear, but with the addition of the split sole, it just makes them even better. Now we're making an even better feeling smearing shoe, and I've already been liking these more for smearing than the Tomoe and Arasaki Pros. And the other benefit of having a softer shoe and a split sole in general is, of course, the bendability, which also makes these shoes probably my all-time favorite toe hooking shoe to date. It was a very quick process for me to realize just how good these things are for toe hooking. As you can see, they have a lot of toe rubber on the top, and that in combination with the softness of the shoe makes for an exceptional feeling toe hooking experience. I really notice a level up in my toe hooking abilities while I'm wearing these shoes. So now an important thing to note in regards to the split sole shoe versus the singular sole shoe, and another big difference I had to get used to from the TN Pros to these flagships, is the fact that this is going to influence how you're standing on small footholds. So I'm by no means an expert on climbing shoe construction, so I can only speak to what I feel personally. But my take on stepping on a small foothold with a singular sole shoe versus a split sole, especially like in regards to the TN Pros versus the flagships, is that I find I feel the power when I'm standing on the small foot once I've already committed to stepping on it and I'm sort of on top of it and now weighting the foothold. Whereas with a stiffer shoe, especially one with a full like singular sole, you're gonna feel more power on a small foothold throughout the whole process of using it. Whereas with this sole, since it's split, I find you only really feel the power once your shoe is flexed and your toe is actually being pointed and weighting the shoe. And that's just because you're getting like the frontal half of the shoe is like where the power is coming from because of the split here, right? So that's just my take on it. Basically, the learning process that I had to go through with these shoes is that I had to get used to the idea of setting up my foot on a small edge, trusting that once I commit to stepping on it and putting the power down through my toe, that's when I'm gonna feel the support and the power of the shoe. And while the stiffer shoe is going to be better for small footholds versus like a shoe like this, the concession is, okay, I'd rather have like a very nice soft shoe with a split sole because the softness helps me for all the volume smearing and all the toe hooking, whereas it functions just well enough on the small feet that it makes it sort of the all-rounder shoe that I'm looking for, especially when it comes to comp style bouldering. Whereas if you're someone who likes to climb outside more or on boards and you're looking for a stiff shoe that functions on small footholds, and that's sort of the primary focus of the typical footwork you do in your training or your climbing, then you're gonna opt for a stiffer shoe rather than a soft shoe like this. But yeah, I find the construction of this super soft shoe is really good for being an all-around shoe, especially for comps. You can tell it's definitely got comp style bouldering in mind with the design of this thing. And while I wouldn't put it down as the best shoe for purely just standing on small footholds, especially when we're talking in the context of like a no-hand slab boulder where it's just simply walking across small feet, I definitely would switch to something like the Tomoe and Arasaki Pros in my kit and wear those for a boulder in this scenario. But in general, the hyper softness of the shoe is definitely a weapon more often than it is a weakness. And that's why this will probably be my go-to shoe in most scenarios. And then I'll use something like the Tomoe and Arasaki's as a substitute for small feet. I also find the rubber on these shoes to be extremely sensitive, and that's been like a really big plus for me in my climbing lately. Especially before I started trying Unparallel shoes, I was coming off wearing the Instinct VSRs by Scarpa, which are known as not being like very sensitive shoes. So when I made the transition to Unparallel, and especially these flagships, it was really a nice treat to be able to feel the footholds I was standing on much more effectively. And I feel like this has actually leveled up my climbing quite recently. And now when we're talking about the edge of this shoe, I find that this shoe is maybe on the relatively pointier side of shoe. And what I mean by that is we take a look at the edge here. So let's say we're talking about the QuBits, which are in my opinion, not as pointy. The part of the edge that we would be stepping on a foothold would be about here. And as you can see with these flagships, the edge comes to about here. And so there's a bit more of a gap in rubber between where your toe is actually standing on the foothold and where your shoe meets the wall. And I find that this isn't a better or worse thing, having a shoe be pointier or not pointier. I find that you can easily adjust to any kind of climbing shoe. The difficult part of a pointy versus a non-pointy toe shoe is just switching back and forth between them quite easily. I find that if I get used to climbing in a pointy toe shoe, it makes it a bit weirder when I go and climb in a non-pointy toe shoe. So what I usually try to do is stick to one or the other for the majority of my training. A little pro of a shoe with a slightly pointier toe is actually being able to step on blocked or capped crimps and also being able to step in pockets. If your shoe sort of doesn't have that extra bit of protrusion at the edge here, it means that the end point of your shoe is a bit thicker and will fit into less cracks basically. So if there's a crimp you want to step on, but it's got a blocker, a pointier toe shoe might be able to slide into that crack more effectively, or same logic applies when we're trying to step on a pocket. And in recent months of climbing with these Flagship Pros, this little bonus has come in handy from time to time, and I've been able to step on footholds that I wouldn't be able to step on with something like the QuBits. So now let's talk about the heel on this thing. Something that I briefly mentioned while I was testing the waters with my shoe reviews in the earlier training videos was the fact that I really try to opt for shoes with like a full rubber heel. So you'll notice this trend with the TNs and the QuBits. I have for my whole climbing career, I've had it in my head that I really hate it when there's a bit of a gap in rubber on a heel on a shoe like this. And it's simply because the material, like this felt-like material on these shoes, feels a bit slippery when I heel hook with this part of the shoe. And oftentimes with other brands, this gap is quite big and doesn't allow me to even try and dodge it or heel with a slightly different part of the shoe. So this was actually one of the factors that made me a bit skeptical about pulling the trigger and trying out the Flagship Pros, and is actually why I started with the TNs and the QuBits. But of course I eventually wanted to get to these shoes, and now here we are. And I've realized that this is potentially, I think it is the only shoe that is the exception to this rule. I actually really like the heel on this shoe. It is quite soft and it's very sensitive. I find I can really feel what I'm heel hooking with this shoe quite effectively. And there's actually just enough room here past this felt that I am a bit intentional, that I try to heel hook not on the red part of the shoe basically, and I heel just below it. And this is a very powerful feeling part of the heel. And it's crazy how I went from feeling quite skeptical about this shoe in general to having this become probably one of my favorite heels on a shoe that I've ever worn. Definitely the most sensitive heel, which is something that I'm not used to. And the rubber is also quite sticky. So the sensitivity in combination with the stickiness is a really powerful combination, and I've really been liking this heel hook recently. Lastly, let's talk about the wear and tear factor on these shoes. So two of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to climbing shoe breakage is when we have the heel on a shoe fail due to having a gap in the rubber like this, and then it starts to peel when you heel hook on that part of the shoe, or having toe rubber peel up. This is pretty notorious with shoes like the VSRs or some Sportiva models. Is after a few sharp aggressive toe hooks, there goes your toe rubber. It's just peeling up and you have to like super glue it, and that doesn't even stay. So a shoe with solid toe rubber that stays intact, very important. A heel that doesn't peel, and then of course also a Velcro strap that does not rip or break. So the long story short is that these flagships pass every one of those tests very effectively. I've climbed in these shoes for as long as it would take other models to break in these places, and they have been in absolute pristine condition in these 3 points of construction since I started wearing them. Obviously, this is not the pair of shoes I'm referring to. I have another pair that I've been climbing in, But yeah, the Velcro strap is going nowhere, very thick and sturdy, definitely not gonna rip. The toe rubber on top of this shoe is constructed perfectly, and I have been seriously abusing the toe hook on this thing for months, and it has shown no signs of peeling. And in combination with being just like my favorite toe hook of all time, it makes for a really happy combination. So basically when the shoe reaches the end of its life, it's gonna be because of the edge getting a hole in it, which is how a shoe should be ending. And as long as the Velcro strap doesn't break, toe doesn't peel, heel doesn't peel, I'm pretty content with the shoe. And it passes all 3 tests for me, which is really nice. Also, with the nature of this being such a soft shoe designed for performance, basically this shoe is designed like a Ferrari is designed, right? This thing is designed for performance, and it may be a bit more fragile than something like a pickup truck. But yeah, this is designed to like perform really well on boulders, especially on comp style boulders, and will overall have a shorter lifespan than a super stiff, bulky kind of shoe. So yeah, in general, this thing is designed for performance and naturally will just have like a bit of a shorter lifespan than something like the QuBit. And actually the actual last thing I want to talk about these shoes before we call this review is the style factor, which is a very important part of the shoe wearing process in my opinion. And without a doubt, nobody can tell me that these are not the most stylish things that you can put on your feet while climbing up a wall. I would wear these shoes simply just for the style factor alone. So anyway, that's the Flagship Pros by Unparallel. Without a doubt, my new favorite climbing shoe of all time. And stay tuned for our reviews of other models.